Ever since playing the SNES in my early childhood, I've always loved video games. One thing that's always been my passion though is finding those games that not a lot of people have heard about, or that were popular back when I was a kid and seem to have exited the mainstream light for something that came along that was bigger and better. Here lately though, with recent trends in the gaming industry, what's coming doesn't feel bigger or better. Things like loot boxes, microtransactions, half-baked games with overpriced DLC have been flooding the AAA market at an alarming rate. Thankfully, there are other places we can look. Older games, indie titles, even some newer games in the AAA market that don't get the same mainstream attention that they should. That's where we come in. See, I believe everyone has a select few games that they think are hidden gems. Whether they actually are hidden gems or not, that's what we're going to try and figure out. With your suggestions, I think we can cover a fair bit of these games and sort them by whether or not they're hidden gem or whether they belong in the trash. With all that said, my name is Gary, and this is Gem Hunting. Retro indie games, for lack of a better term, have become quite popular in gaming during recent years. There are a ton of other games that have found success in the same way. Just not as much. However, today we won't be talking about any of those games. No. We're talking about a game I had no idea I would grow so fond of. Fortix, a retro indie-fied version of the classic 1981 DOS game Kix. Prior to researching for this video, I thought the idea of a Kix successor was unique and had only really resurfaced in the art minigame from Bully. Boy was I wrong, there are a ton of these kinds of games. There's Urbanix, where we develop land for cities, Cubix, which is basically Kix on a 3D cube. Both of these, as well as a few others, all found releases on PlayStation consoles. These types of games have found their way onto the iOS store as well as in arcades. The arcade versions, like Dancing Eyes, are... well, let's just say this video might not be advertiser friendly to dear old YouTube if we talk about them. Thankfully, we aren't talking about those games yet, and instead we'll be focusing this video on Fortix. Beware, I will be spoiling the entirety of this game. Not that there really is much that can be spoiled. Fortix has us take control of Knight Fortix, a valiant knight and heir to the late king of the great land Fortania. Wait, doesn't that make him king now? Shouldn't the game be called King Fortix? Whatever. Unfortunately, Fortania's once fertile lands have been corrupted in darkness by the evil wizard Zertrov. Okay, I was gonna let the country's name go, Fortania. I was gonna let the main character's name go, Knight Fortix. But your main villain is named Zitrov? That's just Fortix flipped backwards. That is some of the most lazy writing I have ever seen in my life. Anyway, we're trying to save Fortania from the evil wizard Zertrov. He spread his darkness across the continent like butter on toast, and only we can stop him. Yes, this story is as generic as it sounds. Thankfully, we're not here for story, and Fortix really shines in its gameplay. So if you haven't played Kix, or its apparently many successors, the general idea is you start on the edge of the map and must move into the dangerous area, we'll call it, and make it to another side of the map while ensuring the Kix, Sparks, or whatever baddies that particular game wants to throw at you don't touch you or the line that you create to section off part of that map. In Kix, section off 75% of the map and you're on to the next level. Fortix tweaks this a little and requires you to capture specific fortresses that are guarded by Zertrov's turrets, and the percentage of map captured only helps with your score. To recapture our knight's lost land, we start on the outer wall of each stage and using either mouse or keyboard controls must segment off bits of the darkness at a time, just like Kix. Yes, it's still incredibly simple, but the game does have a fair bit to make things interesting though. First of all, just like in Kix, if your character or the line that protrudes from his backside makes contact with an enemy, that's a life lost. Our enemies in Fortix are green dragons, bone dragons, black dragons, bloodbats, and turrets. The dragons, and that includes the bloodbat, each have a different way they travel and an ability unique to them. Zertrov's turrets will shoot cute little pellets that you must avoid as well. To combat these various obstacles, there are a couple things our valiant Knight King can do. Scattered across each map are catapults and crossed axes that look like little marshmallows on sticks. Capture the area around a crossed axe and you trigger a catapult that will knock out one turret. It's a little silly though that both the axes and the catapults are on the map, that you can't capture the catapults instead of the axes, but that's it, that's a nitpick. Along with the catapults, there are various power-ups that our Holy Knight can pick up, that come in the form of a pentagram. Are we sure we're the good guys? Getting your powers from a pentagram doesn't seem very knightly or heroic. Wait, what if we're the bad guys? What if Knight Fortix is an evil knight and Zitrov is trying to stop his evil reign by shrouding the world in darkness? Wait, no. What if we're the darkness? Anyway, these power-ups can be anything from temporary invincibility, extra lives, a temporary time stop, or a free kill on an enemy. Also, any enemies that you capture inside of your segmenting of the map will meet their end as well. To reach these, our hero may have to cross some difficult terrain in some parts of a level, like water or mountains, which will slow him down significantly while in it. My favorite strategy is to do little hops, as I like to call them, up the center of the stage, and capture a whole half of the map at a time. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy that really racks up the points. Speaking of points, you receive more points for how many enemies you capture at a time, the size of your biggest capture, finishing the level flawlessly, how fast you complete a stage, and how difficult the level is. By now, if you've been watching the video, you've probably noticed that Fortix doesn't have much to look at graphically. They use this watercolor style for the backgrounds that should look good, but there's just so much brown and green, and it feels depressing to look at. Also, there isn't much variety in the music for each stage, and the tracks sound all the same. Thankfully, the songs are at least decent, but by the end you'll be wishing for a bigger variety in music. The game doesn't last long either, only clocking in at around an hour or two at best. One thing I want to end on is that Fortix has pretty decent pacing for what it is. Across Fortix's 22 stages, changes to game mechanics and enemies are introduced pretty consistently. Almost every level there will be something different to change up how you approach each level. Each stage gets slightly more complicated than the last, and the further you go, the more maps will have to be cleared to liberate an area. By the time you confront Zertrov, you will be a master of the mechanics, and even then he can still be challenging until you get the hang of his unique attacks. Aside from the final level, there honestly isn't a huge challenge in just finishing the game, as it is pretty easy. The real challenge from this game comes from completing each level flawlessly, and playing on the harder difficulties, which are unlocked after finishing the game once. These harder difficulties speed up enemies, making them quite faster and harder to dodge. Fortix will only last a couple hours at best to 100% everything, but at the time of making this video, the game sits at 99 cents on Steam, and it doesn't take much power to run the game, so even non-gaming PCs can play it. Also, according to an interview with Nemesis Games posted by Beep23 on SteamGifts.com, the game had a mere 3 months development time, making many of the minor complaints I had throughout the video much more forgivable. Except the name thing. You can do better. To me, Fortix is the perfect kind of game to sit down and spend a few hours on, just mellowing out after a long day's work. Oh, this all begs the question, is Fortix a hidden gem? Well, if you ask me, I say yes, absolutely. The game's cheap, it's fun to play, it might be a little on the short side, but for the price, it's not that big a deal. Complaints I have, aside from the name, are rather nitpicky. That being said, I don't recommend you buy this game. Why is that? Simple, because Fortix 2 exists. Fortix 2 is the real deal. Every complaint I had about Fortix is addressed in the game's sequel. Look, it's so bright and colorful. There's more than like 3 songs. The mechanics are better, the new enemies are plentiful, and it streamlines a ton of smaller things that were in Fortix 1. Like, why do we need to capture the marshmallow stick thing? Now we only have to capture the catapults. Remember that hopping strategy I talked about earlier in Fortix? Fortix 2 is an enemy that counters that, meaning in a lot of these levels, you have to use so much more strategy and plan exactly where you're going to capture. The game will punish you if you just go wildly capturing entire maps again. I know what you're thinking though. If I don't get the first game, I'm missing out on that juicy lore and gameplay from the first game. Fear not. Every level of Fortix is remade and present in Fortix 2, and you can unlock them really early in the game. There was even a multiplayer mode called Fortix Duel Nights. However, this was hosted on another website, and you've got to buy tokens to play more than a few matches. And as old as the game is, nobody's playing it anyway. Thankfully, the base game on Steam is super cheap. It's pretty apparent that the original Fortix was overshadowed by its sequel, which is why it was forgotten. But what about Fortix 2? Why didn't it blow up like the previously mentioned Shovel Knight or something like Stardew Valley? Looking at some estimated sales, the game did do pretty decent, but why didn't it explode? For starters, I think the game's length had something to do with it, as well as the limited replay value. Also, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Shovel Knight pioneered this whole revitalization of retro-style games, or at least in my eyes it did. That being said, Fortix 2 released 3 years before Shovel Knight did. This means it didn't get to ride the wave created by Shovel Knight like other games might have. The final thing Fortix 2 really didn't have was hype. There was so much press generated for how ambitious of a Kickstarter Shovel Knight was, and how much it raised. The game played the dangerous hype game and it paid off. Fortix 2, on the other hand, is pretty much unheard of. Now, don't mistake my comparison of Fortix 2 and Shovel Knight as me heralding that the Fortix duology should be viewed as an equal product or that of the same level of quality that Shovel Knight is. I just find it really interesting for some reason that something like Fortix has been forgotten and not even heard of really by gamers, and a game like Shovel Knight just blew up in popularity, when at their core they both are retro indie revivals. I mean, I guess that is the only similarity between them, but still, it's interesting to me. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. And this is the part where I'm supposed to ask you to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell. And if you want to do that, I encourage it entirely. However, I would rather focus on a couple questions at the end of these videos. The first being, please, at the end of this video and any video in the future, tell me what games you want me to play next. I don't know every game out there. I'm never going to try to claim I'm an expert on every game out there. But I love discovering new games, and I love giving my opinion on games, which is why I created this YouTube channel. Also, please tell me, what did you think of Fortix and Fortix 2? Am I right? Are they hidden gems? Or am I wrong and they're complete trash? Please, let me know. I love getting feedback. I love getting constructive criticism. And thank you all again so much for watching. And with all that said, I'll see you guys on the next gem hunting.